Welcome back to Southeast Asia Radio. Today, we'll be covering Thailand's digital wallet scheme and updates from Indonesia's relocation of their capital to Nusantara.
We'll also discuss the uproar surrounding the Philippines' online gambling sector and Vietnam's boom in renewable energy investments. I'm Lauren Mai.
And I'm Japhet Kitsan. Today is July 25th, 2024. On this week's conversation...
Now, observers have used a variety of adjectives to describe what Washington and Manila have delivered together in the past 3.5 years. But I believe that historians will record this period in the alliance as truly transformative and decisive, as emblematic of broader strategic changes across the Indo-Pacific, as the direct result of leadership by both President Biden and President Marcos, and as a central feature of Secretary Austin's legacy in the region.
That was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Eli Ratner, who gave a keynote speech during the 14th Annual South China Sea Conference hosted on July 11th. Before that, let's start with our headlines.
For today's episode, we're going to be settling the age-old debate on digital wallets. Zelle or Venmo?
Personally, I really love Venmo. The newsfeed has a fun social aspect to it.
That's a hot take. Venmo's feed has always thrown me off. Like, why do I need to know that you paid someone for a movie ticket?
That's the fun part, but fair enough. The phenomenon of Venmo voyeurs in public transactions is a little unsettling. But this debate could go on a lot longer if we wanted to.
Exactly. In fact, while we Americans argue about our abundance of wallet options, debates on even registering a wallet are heating up in Thailand, where a digital wallet scheme was proposed by Prime Minister Srettha Thavisin to reinvigorate the country's sluggish economy.
That's right. The program is part of the government's ambitious $14 billion program to offer cash handouts to local businesses and citizens, which PM Srettha claims will boost the country's GDP growth by up to 1.6 percentage points.
More specifically, the government announced in April that the plan aims to give 10,000 baht, or around $300, to 50 million citizens in digital money to spend on local businesses.
It's an ambitious plan. Local businesses are already expecting significant gains from the program, with restaurant conglomerate Central Restaurants Group expecting a 5% increase in sales growth in 2024.
Despite these anticipated benefits, the plan has already drawn a wide criticism, with economists claiming that the program is an unsustainable measure to boost the country's economic state.
In addition to the public backlash, the program has faced some hurdles in its implementation stage, with uncertainty surrounding the sources for its required funding and the eligibility of citizens for the cash handouts.
The future of Thailand's digital wallet scheme is up in the air for now. By early August, eligible citizens and businesses can start enrolling for the program. Let's stay tuned for more.
Sounds good. For our next story, we have some updates on Indonesia's relocation process to its new capital, Nusantara. The relocation initially began as Indonesia's current capital, Jakarta, is sinking due to climate change. The traffic congestion continues to worsen, making it very difficult to get around. So I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want to hear first, Lauren?
That sounds scary. Good news first, then.
Sure. The good news is the relocation process has finally started. Indonesian Minister of Transportation, Budi Karya Sumadi, has become the first member of President Joko Widodo's cabinet to operate from his ministerial residence in Nusantara.
Great. I'm glad that things are moving. I heard that the project is behind schedule, though.
Yeah, that's my bad news. President Joko Widodo announced that he has delayed his relocation to Nusantara due to lack of critical infrastructure like clean water and electricity.
Oh no. I also heard that the Indonesian government has been struggling to attract investment for the new capital. Is that true?
Yes, the relocation has been delayed twice as the government failed to meet key construction deadlines, so some foreign investors have backed off from the project.
That's unfortunate, but it seems like President Jokowi is trying hard to make this project happen. He signed a regulation allowing investors to apply for land rights permits of up to 190 years.
Right. This decision is part of the Indonesian government's race to attract more private investment to the capital project since 80% of its budget relies on private sector financing.
Another effort was made to raise funding for this project. Last Tuesday, President Jokowi met with investors in the United Arab Emirates to put money into Nusantara.
During this visit, President Jokowi successfully bagged $3 billion in investment to fund the Nusantara project. This investment is expected to give a boost to Indonesia's tourism ecosystem and infrastructure.
That's a good sign. President Jokowi is obviously trying his best to finish his legacy project before leaving office in October. But given that there have been significant roadblocks recently, will the next administration keep up with this project?
It really depends. Analysts say President-elect Prabowo Subianto was eager to take over his incumbent's programs during his election campaign, but his intention grows unclear after he got the seat.
He promised a free school meal program, which will cost at least $27 million annually starting next year. There are concerns that conducting both projects at the same time is not viable given Indonesia's tightening budget.
But President Jokowi signed a law that requires the completion of his capital project, so maybe it can keep Prabowo from dropping out completely.
Very interesting. Nusantara's launch day is set on August 17th, right in time for Indonesia's Independence Day celebrations. Let's see if Jokowi can meet the deadline in time. On to our next story. As Jokowi goes under fire for the controversial move to Nusantara, another country in the region has been facing the heat due to the social costs of its online gambling industry.
In the Philippines, scandal surrounding a fugitive mayor, Alice Go, has prompted a government probe due to her alleged ties to the Philippine offshore gaming operator industry, or POGO, and specious claims surrounding her citizenship.
For context, the Philippines' POGO sector is driven by Chinese nationals setting up offshore operations to evade China's ban on online gambling. POGOs have gone under scrutiny due to the sector's association with human trafficking, prostitution, and illicit financial flows. Southeast Asia program intern Amelie De Leon outlines this more in her latest blog post, so do check it out for more information.
As the mayor of Bamban Tarlac, Guo was linked to the raid of an illegal gaming operator in her home territory, which was embroiled in a money laundering scheme. This resulted in criminal complaints of qualified trafficking, the freezing of her assets, and an arrest warrant.
In another shocking development, it was further revealed that Guo's fingerprints matched a Chinese national's, with officials speculating Guo had illegitimately assumed the identity of a Filipino woman.
The media circus surrounding Alice Guo has greatly incentivized the Filipino government to begin clamping down on the online gambling industry. During Bongbong Marcos's third State of the Nation address, he formally announced the official ban of all offshore gambling operators.
We'll be witnessing a significant overhaul from the Philippines' online gambling industry in the coming months.
As Manila gets back on its feet, Vietnam has been experiencing some impressive economic gains, spurred by a massive influx in its renewable energy and infrastructure sectors.
2 weeks ago, Vietnam issued Decree 80 on direct power purchase agreements, a regulation allowing businesses to purchase renewable energy from private producers other than the state-backed Vietnam Electricity.
The regulation is expected to facilitate a surge in solar and wind energy production, helping ease the burden on Vietnam's old electricity grid and reduce the number of blackouts in the country.
And on a broader scale, the law will allow businesses to reduce their carbon footprint and contribute to Vietnam's clean energy transition, as Vietnam aims to achieve net zero by 2050.
However, while Vietnam begins its transition to renewables, natural gas continues to play a big role in the economy as the government considers natural gas as an alternative to coal during the shift.
That's why Vietnam called for fundings to develop its Block B gas field in southern Vietnam.
Do you mind telling us which country invested in the project?
Of course. Vietnam received an investment of $823 million from Japanese lenders, in which the state-backed Japan Bank for International Cooperation contributed roughly half of the deal.
Wow, that's a big investment. Did you also know that Vietnam is not only an investment recipient, but a donor?
Yes, VinFast, a Vietnamese electric vehicle maker, is building a $4 billion factory in North Carolina, expected to launch next year.
VinFast just announced the delay of its factory to 2028 and a cut of 20,000 units for this year's delivery forecast.
That's not a very optimistic development. Overall, the EV market does not look good this year. And those are the headlines. Did we miss anything? Be sure to write us about the topics you're interested in at scaradio@csis.org, and we'll be more than happy to cover them.
Up next, Eli Ratner's keynote speech. Stay tuned.
Hey folks, Greg here. In lieu of one of our regular discussions with Alina and me and a guest, this week what we've decided to do is give you a taste of the annual CSIS South China Sea Conference, which took place on July 11th this year. In particular, what you're about to hear is the lunch keynote delivered by Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Security Affairs, Eli Ratner, followed by a brief armchair Q&A with yours truly. So, enjoy.
Today, I want to talk about an aspect of the department's track record in the region that we're particularly proud of, and that's the historic progress that we're seeing in the alliance between the United States and the Philippines. Now, observers have used a variety of adjectives to describe what Washington and Manila have delivered together in the past 3.5 years, but I believe that historians will record this period in the alliance as truly transformative and decisive, as emblematic of broader strategic changes across the Indo-Pacific, as the direct result of leadership by both President Biden and President Marcos, and as a central feature of Secretary Austin's legacy in the region. That's because over the course of this administration, we have elevated the U.S.-Philippines alliance to stand among our most vital defense partnerships in the world. We've raised the profile of alliance engagements. We've stood shoulder to shoulder with Manila in the midst of a changing security environment. We've delivered major agreements for U.S. rotational presence in the Philippines and sought unprecedented funding to support these agreements. We've taken major steps to increase interoperability with the Philippines and our support for the modernization of the armed forces of the Philippines. And we've pursued new opportunities together with the Philippines to cooperate multilaterally with like-minded partners across the Indo-Pacific in support of a shared vision for a free and open region. Of course, sometimes when you're following these issues day to day, as I know many of you are, it can be difficult to step back and take stock of the totality of what we've achieved in the U.S.-Philippines alliance over the past several years. So today I wanted to walk through each of these key areas of progress to give you all a fuller picture of how we at DoD are thinking about the alliance right now, as well as where we see opportunities in the months and years ahead. First, we've seen unprecedented senior leader engagement between Washington and Manila since the start of the Biden administration, including and especially by Secretary Austin. He's invested countless hours in this relationship, and that has directly resulted in greater personal trust as our two countries push forward major defense priorities. As some of you may know, I was actually sworn in by Secretary Austin as he was flying out to the region in the summer of 2021. And one of the most important elements of that trip involved a stop in Manila, where Secretary Austin met with then President Duterte. And I will never forget that engagement, which marked a key turning point at a critical time in the alliance. In the wake of that meeting, we saw a renewed commitment to the alliance on both sides, and the trajectory picked up considerable momentum under the leadership of President Marcos, who Secretary Austin has hosted at the Pentagon on multiple occasions. In fact, when President Marcos was back at the Pentagon just this past April, Secretary Austin repeated something that he says frequently, both in public and private, which is, and I'm quoting here, that our two countries are more than allies, we're family. And I think you've seen that sense of conviction at the core of Secretary Austin's engagements with his counterparts from the Department of National Defense, including most recently with Secretary Teodoro. The two of them have met together here in Washington, in Hawaii, in Jakarta, and in Singapore. They speak regularly on the phone. Together, they participated in April's historic 3+3 meeting with their diplomatic counterparts and the national security advisors from our two countries. And they're poised to meet again soon with Secretary Blinken and Secretary Manalo for another 2+2 ministerial. And that kind of personal investment has yielded enormous dividends for our defense and security cooperation with the Philippines. And this brings me to my second point about how we've continued to stand with our ally as Manila defends its lawful rights in the South China Sea, including at Second Thomas Shoal, which as I believe the previous panel likely discussed, is a low tide elevation beyond any lawful territorial sea. It's on the Philippines continental shelf and well within the Philippines exclusive economic zone. I know that's a lot of legalese, but I also know there are a lot of experts here. I saw Bob Harris earlier, as well as around the world who understand exactly what I'm describing. And let me be clear that the PRC's claim to the shoal has no more credibility today than it did when the arbitral tribunal issued its unanimous ruling in 2016. And the kind of revisionism and coercion we've seen there from the PRC is both destabilizing and dangerous. This aggressive PRC behavior stands in sharp contrast to the remarkable leadership by President Marcos and his team in protecting the well-being of the Philippine troops on the BRP Sierra Madre and in defending the rights of the Philippines under international law. All the while, the United States has acted in support of the Philippines and made clear that our alliance commitments are ironclad and that all nations should be able to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows. Importantly, our cooperation with the Philippines extends well beyond our support for their lawful operations at Second Thomas Shoal and other parts of their exclusive economic zone. And that's my third point today, which is about the significance of what we've delivered together in terms of force posture. Looking back, 2023 was a transformative year for making U.S. force posture in the Indo-Pacific more mobile, distributed, resilient, and lethal. Secretary Austin said in December that it was a decisive year in a decisive decade for our defense priorities with allies and partners in the region. In our decision with the Philippines in 2023 to expand U.S. rotational access to 4 new strategic sites under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement was a highlight in a year that saw a series of major announcements. And we're committed to continuing to invest in infrastructure improvements at all 9 EDCA sites to strengthen combined training, exercises, and interoperability between our forces, as well as to support humanitarian assistance and disaster response efforts. In fact, the Biden administration's budget request this year includes more than $120 million for these efforts, which in just 1 year is more than double than we've invested in EDCA infrastructure to date. We've seen strong bipartisan support on Capitol Hill for the U.S.-Philippines alliance, and this year's budget is a historic opportunity to keep delivering. And as we've reached new agreements with the Philippines on force posture, we've also undertaken a range of other efforts to modernize our defense cooperation, deepen our interoperability, accelerate the Philippines' capability development. And that's my 4th point. On these issues, the department's track record with the Philippines since the start of this administration has been defined by historic mosts, firsts, and first evers. The first combined maritime exercises in the South China Sea in years, the largest ever Baliktan exercise, and the first ever to involve HIMARS and cyber defense elements. The first ever visit of 5th generation U.S. fighter jets to the Philippines, our first ever combined air patrol, and our first ever combined UAV engagement, and new bilateral defense guidelines to provide strategic direction and focus for all of these initiatives. And we're poised to deliver so much more together in the future, including in the coming months. As you've seen publicly, the United States and the Philippines are discussing the conclusion of a General Security of Military Information Agreement, or what experts commonly refer to as a GSOMIA, that will strengthen and expand our information sharing. We're also working together on a security sector assistance roadmap to help prioritize shared investments in the modernization of Philippine forces. And while I don't have anything to announce today, regarding the foreign military financing included in the Indo-Pacific National Security Supplemental that Congress passed this spring, let me just say that we recognize Capitol Hill's sense of urgency and prioritization when it comes to our support for Manila, and we'll have more to say on that soon. And I would also be remiss if I didn't mention the continued work of the Quad partners in support of the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative, or IPMDA, and the benefits that effort will yield for partners across the South China Sea region, including the Philippines. 5th and finally, the historic growth in the alliance between the United States and the Philippines has helped enable a growing community of minilateral cooperation across the region, and I believe that will be a discussion topic for later today at the conference. In fact, at this year's Shangri-La Dialogue in Singapore, Secretary Austin described this growing trend as a new convergence around nearly all aspects of security in the Indo-Pacific. This is not a single coalition or institution, and it's certainly not like any other arrangement in any other region. Instead, it's unique to the opportunities and challenges of the Indo-Pacific, comprised of like-minded countries who share a vision for what the region can and should look like. And 2 months ago in Hawaii, the defense ministers from Australia, Japan, the Philippines, and the United States held their first ever joint press conference after a long day of meetings together. And for me, that event really captured the spirit of this new convergence, our shared sense of momentum, and yes, the vital role of the Philippines. The future we're striving toward is one with greater interoperability and cooperation among like-minded Indo-Pacific partners. And this means enhanced reciprocal access, more participation in larger and more complex regional exercises, greater investment together in advanced capabilities. And Manila stands at an intersection of all of that. Now, the new convergence in the Indo-Pacific won't always start or include the United States, and nor should it. That's why, for example, we are really encouraged by the important opportunities that will emerge from the reciprocal access agreement announced just this week between Japan and the Philippines. So in closing, I'll just say again that the recent growth of the US-Philippines alliance has been nothing short of remarkable. In fact, some of what we have achieved together would have been simply unimaginable during that flight out to the region 3 years ago. And yet here we are today with a future trajectory that is as clear as it is promising. We've delivered historic results together, and we have more achievements still to come. So thank you again to Greg and to CIS for this opportunity to talk about this administration's track record with the Philippines since taking office, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much, Eli. I noted that you didn't address the June 17th incident. And somebody's going to ask it anyway, so it might as well be me. Just anything you want to say about what happened to our Philippine allies on June 17th, what the implications are for the alliance, potential MDT activation, how we think about our response should it happen again?
Well, happy to... Are we on here?
I think so.
There we go. I think I'm on. How about now?
Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thanks, Rick. Thanks again for the opportunity. I should have said also at the beginning, Greg himself and CIS as an institution is doing some of the best and most important work on the Philippines relationship, and has been for many, many, many years before it was the topic of singular keynote addresses here at CSIS. So Greg has been ahead of the curve, and we at the department continue to look to his wisdom and research and counsel on almost everything we're doing. So just really wonderful to be here. Look, let me just say on the recent events, I mean, obviously, the world saw what happened there. We think the transparency that has been part of the Philippines' approach to issues in the South China Sea has been important to set the record straight about the activities of the PRC, which, as I described, are inconsistent with international law. They're coercive. They're destabilizing. Well, the Philippines is conducting lawful activities to protect its troops and to exercise its rights under international law. And that was on full display in recent events. In terms of the MDT, I know there have been a lot of questions about this. Again, I am not here to make news. I'm not going to get into hypotheticals, but what I will say is what's real. And what's real is the United States has said repeatedly that its commitment to the Philippines is ironclad. We have said this publicly and privately. We are working every day in close coordination at all levels, at political levels, diplomatic levels, military levels. And the work of the alliance is charging forward as events in the South China Sea are unfolding. And as I said, we are moving forward with posture, strengthening the capabilities of the AFP, engaging multilaterally, and that is really important. But what is also real is that the PRC's activities continue to be destabilizing and coercive. And so, while I understand there are a lot of questions and hypotheticals about the MDT, I think the most important question should be about the PRC and what this behavior reveals about their intentions. And the lens ought to be more focused on that than on pressing questions to the United States and the Philippines about the MDT.
Fair enough. All right. Blink twice. All right. Let's talk about China then. When you were here 2 years ago, a big chunk of your focus was on the, at that time, very worrying rise in the frequency of unsafe air-to-air intercepts. That seemed to continue until President Biden and President Xi met after APEC. And then Indo-Pacific, at the beginning of this year, said that those had decreased. Are we still not comfortable? Are we more comfortable than we were last time you were here with the behavior of the PLA Air Force toward the U.S. and our allies, at least in the skies above the East and South China Sea?
Well, I'll say we're never comfortable because one of these events is too many, and there continue to be activities in the skies in the Indo-Pacific that are of concern against U.S. forces who are operating legally in accordance with international law. However, the rate of the activities that I spoke about over the last couple years ago have in fact decreased, and that is encouraging. And would like to think that as a recognition of the fact that that behavior was both inconsistent with international law and quite dangerous, which was what the purpose of the remarks were at the time. And we've had the opportunity to engage directly with the PLA since then, both at the operator level and at the ministerial level. So there has been a significant decrease in some of those activities against U.S. forces. I think the challenge is that we continue to see ringing the East Asian littoral continued dangerous, coercive, risky behavior against U.S. allies and partners. And that is no less dangerous and no less risky and no less serious. And that behavior should stop as well. And, I've spent a lot of time probably today talking about Second Thomas Shoal and what we're seeing in and around the South China Sea. That type of behavior is happening elsewhere as well against other U.S. allies and partners. So the overall pattern of coercive and revisionist, destabilizing, dangerous behavior continues, but it is encouraging that the particular air intercepts that we spoke about a couple of years ago have in fact decreased.
Okay, thank you. And at the end of the month, you'll be going out with the secretary for the 2+2 in Manila. Obviously, all of this is going to be in the ether, but any specific issues that you'd like to highlight that'll be pushed forward at that meeting?
Look, I think we're going to be at some of them previewed in the remarks I just made about the work that we are doing on the security sector assistance roadmap. That's a new effort to align, to have bilateral consensus on the types of capabilities that we want to be focused on in our support for Philippines military modernization. We are also, again, working with Congress on substantially increasing the level of security assistance for the AFP as they are thinking about working to transition to a different type of military in a way that is will strengthen deterrence in the region. So there is the defense cooperation space. We are also working on some of the multilateral and minilateral issues that I mentioned, following up on the meetings that the Secretary has had in Hawaii and some of the cooperation we're doing with Japan in Australia that is quite significant, and a series of, again, other defense bilateral issues. So I think it will stand as a really important event. I should note as well that the Secretary and Secretary Blinken have scheduled a series of 2+2s over the next couple of months, also with Japan, with the Philippines, and then with Australia, the annual Osman talk. So a lot of what we are doing with the Philippines is, of course, important in a bilateral context, but it is set in a broader regional strategy in which each of these elements, whether we're talking about force posture, capability support, minilateral support, is occurring on a regional scale. And this set of engagements, I think, will really be unprecedented in terms of knitting together a lot of our connected efforts. And I should also say, talk to people frequently who, when they come in to see me now, been in the role now 3+ years, and they say, look, we're getting into the last 6 months of the first term. You must just really be focused on nailing down what you've already done and institutionalizing what you've already done. And in fact, that's not the case in terms of what we are only doing. Of course, we are doing that. But I think what we have found is that the energy that we have put into the initiatives over the last couple of years has reached an escape velocity of its own that is creating even more momentum and new opportunities. So I would expect that we will continue, including during the 2+2, to be able to put big new initiatives on the board, big new innovative, entrepreneurial, strategically important momentum in the alliance, and that will continue over the next several months.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Assistant Secretary of Defense Eli Ratner. Thank you, as always, for listening to South Asia Radio. Alina and I will be back with our regular programming in 2 weeks.
Thanks again for joining us for this episode of Southeast Asia Radio. Feel free to write us with any comments, questions, or feedback at searadio@csis.org, and we'll get back to you.
Do us a favor and subscribe and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever streaming platform that you listen to us on. Tell your friends about us.
Marla Hiller is our producer, and our interns are Zhang Pham and Amelie DeLeon. My name is Japhet Kitson,
And I'm Lauren Mai.
and we'll see you in 2 weeks for another episode of Southeast Asia Radio.